accessed the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron and Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Hey fellow Owens, welcome back to the podcast of OA. I'm your co-host Myron and Rumsey, and this is episode number 196. This episode, my brother Phil and I are going to talk about Green Lantern number 4 and your listener feedback. So Phil, we just got in celebrating the 4th of July holiday or Independence Day over here in the United States. England, we're sorry about all the tea. But
hey, I'd also like to send a heartfelt apology to any listeners that were living in the Northwest. Man, that was hot.
Oh,
that's rough.
We here it's interesting in upstate New York right now. We're starting to feel the effects of Hurricane Elsa, but it's been we've had. It's usually the weather we have in May. Like one day it may be hot, one day it may be cold, one day it may thunderstorm. It's just been crazy weather patterns. We've had days where it's been in the 90s, and then we'll have a day where it's in the low 60s.
We had a couple days down here where it was like just storms were just popping up all over. Remember, we had 3 storms in one day. Just popped up all randomly everywhere. And every time I looked at the radar, it was like this. It almost looked like a construct. It was just changing.
It's just been crazy weather. But we've got a new issue of Green Lantern to talk about today. And we've also got a little bit of Green Lantern news. I don't know whether folks listening, some folks may be interested in Funko, some people may not. But their pop line, we knew a while ago that they were going to be doing kind of a lantern lineup, and they did Black Hand, and there's a Black Lantern Wonder Woman coming out this month. And there are 2 more on the horizon. We talked about Atrocitus in the last episode, but our good friend Chad Bokelman from the Lantern Cast posted a picture just the other day about a White Lantern Sinestro Funko Pop that is connected to San Diego Comic-Con, but also a retailer exclusive. And we're assuming Hot Topic because Hot Topic seems to be the ones jumping on the Lantern Funko Pops these days. So that's kind of cool.
Hey, didn't the fellows over at Lantern Cast, didn't they reach out to somebody and about the Funko Pop figures, or the person responded or something?
Yeah, well, we've been trying to. Both of us have been for a while now trying to get more product things to, because we can promote products for these manufacturers, and they just don't seem to want to work with the fan groups. And I know he reached out to Funko about things, and they basically said, you'll see some more stuff soon. But what that means, I don't know. But it's interesting. I enjoy the Funko Pops. I know you and I have talked about it before. To me, it's one of those few collectible lines that embraces so many different pieces of pop culture that you can have your Green Lantern stuff next to wrestling figures, next to all kinds of pop culture, different things, and sit on the shelf. And the toys all look similar because they all have the same art style. So that's kind of cool. I can see where some people have gone overboard, but at the same time, it's fun.
On a side note to the pop figures, they also make great Christmas ornaments because I put some on my tree.
Oh, that's a cool idea. Now, do you like put a hole in their head for a little hanger, or do you just put them on the branches?
I just kind of stick them like they're on the branches, and like the other branch just holds his head kind of steady.
Oh, that's cool. That's a neat idea. Very creative.
Yeah. So, and speaking of pop figures, I still have 3 on order. I think they're on back order, if I'm not mistaken, when I looked at it last, and that's the Wonder Woman one, the Black Lantern, and then the Jessica Cruz, and then the Golden Age Superman.
Cool.
But I did pass up. I'm going to probably kick myself, and I probably should have done it. I was at Apotheosis Comics today, and because I was hanging out with my buddy Andrew, and we went by there, and I wanted to pick up that new issue of the Masters of the Universe Revelations, and they had a Space Ghost pop figure. I should have got it.
Oh, you should have. You're going to kick yourself.
I know I am. It looked so cool. I'm such a huge Space Ghost fan. He's so awesome, but I might have to go back and get it.
Do you have the Wonder Twins ones? Because I know how much you love the Wonder Twins.
Yes, I do have those. Those are my special ones. I am on the lookout for these. I don't even know if eBay had them, but they're high. I wanted the Samurai Jack Aku one. Dude, it's expensive. It's like $500, man.
Wow. Well, the Sinestro one will be kind of nice because they've only really done They did the movie Sinestro one. We've had a Green Lantern Sinestro, but no Yellow Lantern Sinestro, no classic Sinestro figure, just kind of the movie tie-in. So I'm kind of hoping we get to see some of these characters in their, I don't want to say native garb, but their normal attire, rather than just the White Lantern, Black Lantern versions. I hope we see some of those kind of things.
I'd like to see the Sinestro one in his original costume, and then the Sinestro Corps one.
Yeah, exactly. I co-signed 100% there, bud.
Yeah.
Other neat news. Now, last year, DC did a whole thing where they were thanking real-life superheroes by doing a line of Hershey bars that had DC characters on them. And last year, they did 7. They've done it again this year, all new art, and they've upped it to 10 characters. So this year, it's Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Flash, Aquaman, Mera, Batgirl, Cyborg, and Supergirl. And you can get them in the regular size candy bars, and you can get them in the minis. I don't know about you. I know you found them because you posted a picture of them. I found them at my local Walmart.
Yeah, that's where I found mine at.
And I didn't find all 10 of them. I'm still missing a few.
I didn't even get Superman in mine. I was kind of sad.
I know somebody who might have opened up several boxes that were on the shelf.
You?
Guilty as charged. I'll take I'll plead the fifth.
It's okay. Anybody Walmart shoppers listening, don't say anything.
So you see some middle-aged old guy, some middle-aged white guy going through the candy bars, opening up boxes of Hershey bars, looking for things.
Hey, man. You're kicking it old school. We used to do that back in the days, remember?
Right. You got to do what you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have them all open. I was just helping them. Get the products out there. I bought more candy bars as a result of it, But the other thing was, last year we had the Green Lantern 80th anniversary special from DC Comics. There is a Green Arrow one that just came out a week or so ago, and there's a little bit of Green Lantern in it. There's a story that's got a couple of flashback panels of the Hard Traveling Heroes era. There's a story that takes place during the Satellite era with John in a Green Lantern outfit, and the Justice League go off into space, and Green Arrow's left behind on the Justice League satellite, having to tend shop. So this is kind of like a cameo there. And then there's another story later on, which I'll be honest, it kind of bothered me. Hal and Ollie are really good friends, and in this one story, they kind of were at each other's heads, at each other's throats over something that happened, and they didn't talk to each other like they were friends at all. It was... I did not like it whatsoever. It really didn't capture the essence of their character. Not nearly as well as that wonderful Denny O'Neil story that he did for the Green Lantern one. I think the only thing about this 80th anniversary special I liked, to be very honest, I'm not a huge Green Arrow fan, but I loved, there was a story they did that one of Denny O'Neil's kids did, his son did, that is a wordless story. And it almost captures Denny O'Neil's life in a story, which was done very, very well. That made it worthwhile just because I thought it was a nice tribute to Denny O'Neil. But as a Green Lantern fan, I was not happy with what I saw there. But it may be worth picking up if you like Green Arrow. You definitely should pick it up. If you're one of those people that wants to collect every appearance of Green Lantern and something, yeah, pick it up. But I would pick it up just for the Denny O'Neil story because I thought it was very touching, very well tribute. I don't know whether you looked at it at all, Phil.
I think I'm not a huge Arrow fan, but I think the one time I liked him in the animated show. I thought he was cool.
Yeah.
I think in the book form, though, I think the only time I really cared for him, Brightest Day, he was kind of neat. And I liked Cry for Justice by James Robinson, that 2009 series.
Mm-hmm.
I liked him and Hal's relationship in that. But there was a scene in there where I remember Hal, basically telling Superman to F off, and he was going to go enact justice. And I think Green Arrow left with him at the time, because I remember them going upwards or something.
Yeah, there was a whole plot about that where they kind of.
And I thought the relationship in there was kind of cool.
Yeah, I think my favorite Green Arrow stuff is the Satellite era of the Justice League. I loved the interactions between Green Arrow and Hawkman.
Oh yeah, you're right, man. Wow, I haven't thought about that and couldn't tell you when.
I just thought that was fun. To me, it was much more natural than, not to besmirch Denny O'Neil, but I didn't particularly care for Denny O'Neil's approach to Hal and Ollie in Hard Traveling Heroes. I thought it was a little over the top, I guess. And I felt that the relationship between Hawkman and Ollie and the way that they would spar with each other was much more natural to me.
Yeah.
But all right, my friend. Well, we've also got we're getting ready to mark our 200th episode and 10th anniversary, which is coming up soon. So if folks want to send us anything to air during that 200th episode, please do so. Later on, when we get to the listener feedback, there'll be a whole thing about how you can either send us a voicemail or an email or leave us a message in some way that we'll share with everybody on the show. So that's coming up soon. And then, my friend, you have a Know Your Core segment coming up.
No, back to it. I love it.
So why don't we take a quick pause, and when we come back, we can do the Know Your Core, and then we'll start talking about comics.
All right.
Listen up, Lanterns. It's time you took the oath with Green Lantern John Stewart. In brightest day, in blackest night, don't let the podcast of Oa escape your sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power. Green Lantern's light.
Fellow Owens, welcome back to another Know Your Core segment. And this week, we have a great one for two reasons. Number one, because he's cool. Number two, for a sad reason that we'll get to in the next segment. The name Isamot Kol. Isamot Kol made his first appearance in the Green Lantern Corps Recharge number 1, November 2005. The character was created by Jeff Johns, Dave Gibbons, and Patrick Gleason. Isamot Kol was a Lazarkan, one of the different races indigenous to Thanagar, and a veteran soldier of the Ran-Thanagar War, a member of the Imperial Thanagarian Army. Kol was scheduled to be executed for killing his commanding officer because his superior wanted to surrender to a squadron of Ranians. Kol explained that he hated cowards, and after that killing his superior, he and the rest of his squad defeated the Ranians, and that his fellow soldiers attempted to report the superior's death as an accident, but Kol, who personally held truth as a guiding principle, refused to lie. And there you have it, folks. Another cool member of the Know Your Core segment, and we'll hear more about Isamot Kol in issue number 4 of Green Lantern.
Phil, thanks for that great Know Your Core segment. Isamot Kol is a beloved fan favorite Green Lantern. Someone we haven't seen in a while. You know, we saw him in the last issue of this series, not looking so hot. And as we start talking about Green Lantern number 4, we find out maybe those regen powers we were kind of hoping might kick in didn't kick in. So there's a couple. I would say there's one interesting revelation in this particular issue, and then there's a whole lot of other stuff going on that we'll get to shortly. But what was your overall take on this issue?
It's kind of depressing. But I mean, not in a like, oh my gosh kind of way, but more like I don't know, I question. This issue made me question the writer a little bit more.
Yeah. I don't know if I could question him any more than I already was questioning him, but
Sure.
to me,
I figured I wasn't going to contact you about this one because I didn't want to blow the top on your head.
If I were actually was buying this issue in a paper version, I'd have tore it up because it really made me incensed. So let's start out a little bit though about maybe some of the positives in this issue, or maybe for me at least the only positive, and I'm not even sure if it's a positive in this issue.
Okay.
There was in the very beginning we see kind of a dream sequence with John, and John is basically communicating with Ganthet. And this is in the moments after the time after Hal has turned into Parallax, and John is talking with the Guardian over his ability, because John was a human guardian. He was elevated to the status of Guardian, and they're talking about the whole thing that once you've ascended, there's no means of going back. And John is like, "Listen, I've already lost 2 worlds. One of my best, because the Mosaic world is gone. One of my best friends is so unhinged with grief, he's trying to kill the whole universe." And as this is happening, we hear John's name being called, but not before Ganthet says, "I can't erase your ascension, but I can hide it." And so that kind of alludes back to, again, that whole Mosaic run where John was elevated to the rank of Guardian. And obviously in this issue and in the series, Jeffrey Thorne is going to continue to play upon this, because we've had lots of throwbacks to and nods to Mosaic from issue 1 and forward. It seems like almost every issue there's some kind of a nod to Mosaic, and rightly so, because I think that's really the only time that John has really been given an opportunity to shine. So he's kind of leaning on that pretty heavily. But I know that whole ascension to guardianship has kind of been swept under the rug for years. And I don't know whether that's in part because of who the writer was and what he ultimately went on to do, or if they just felt like, geez, what do I do with the character who's got guardian powers? How do I make him a threat, have him have threats against him like a Green Lantern would when he's not on that same level? And so I'm not sure, again, what Thorne's plan is here. If he's going to play upon that and John is going to have guardian powers, is that how they restore the battery? I don't know. But to me, I think it was better left in the back like that, because I think it makes it hard for how do you use John as a Green Lantern. Now maybe he'll pull like one of these ion things where he gives up his guardian powers to reignite the battery at the end. Who knows?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Sadly, and this is probably, and I mean, I don't know. I'm torn on him as a character, because I'm not really into John Stewart a lot, right? So, not having the knowledge base like I do with Hal or Kyle, for that matter, or Jessica Cruz, I don't know what motives Thorne is using to drive the character that John Stewart is. I always remember the John Stewart that was written, before, like when he would be in like the Green Lantern Corps book, or he would be in Robert Venditti's book. I kind of knew that John Stewart, and I knew the animated series John Stewart, but I don't know the comic book character that much. I do know two things. I mean, he's not my favorite, obviously, and he's killed before. So I grow a little tired of the righteousness that is placed upon John Stewart as his character. But, I mean, no one's immune from, criticism, because everybody's done shady stuff in their life.
Right.
But everybody always praises John Stewart, and it's like, well, hold on, man. He killed two characters, I mean, that doesn't seem like that's something that people should forget. But yet, everybody criticizes Hal for everything that he does.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, it's a little, I mean, can we call hypocrite here? I mean, right. I don't know.
Right.
So that's where I'm at with the John Stewart story. So what I had to do with this book was, okay, I need to quit looking at John Stewart as him as a character, because I don't have a lot of familiarity with him. I need to try to figure out just the story itself and not focus so much on him. So it helped me read this a little better, but it also helped me not like it a little bit more this issue.
Right. It's interesting. I think John is one of those characters that unfortunately has not been given a good, stable background as a character. You have how he was originally introduced, and then they tried to evolve him more into the whole architect thing, and then the cartoon came along, and the cartoon ignored everything in the comics and made him a different character. And then there was a good fan response to that character, so then Jeff Johns is left with, well, how do I parse two different versions of the character? So he tried to merge them together, and I thought he did a pretty good job. But you've got things like, as you've pointed out, he's killed before. Remember the whole thing with Kurt, and he snapped his neck, and obviously there's Zan-Shi and those kind of things. He's not afraid to cross that line, which is funny, because why should we tolerate that from anybody crossing a line? There was a whole time when Green Lanterns couldn't kill with their ring, and here he does it without problem, and without any kind of a problem. That whole soldier thing kicks in, but that to me is a poor excuse. But again, other Green Lanterns have killed before too, so I think whatever suits the writer's needs, and that's the unfortunate thing, is we have a rich history of writers who kind of bend the lore and bend the characters to suit their purposes. And unfortunately, when you look at the bigger tapestry of the fictional universe, things don't always line up well. And I think those are some of those things. My problem with the first half of the book is that when are we going to get somewhere with it? It just seems very interesting to read. Have read 4 issues, and other than the power battery blowing up, what's happened? If you're buying this book, you're $20 in right now. Do you have a story yet? We don't. I feel like we're still in chapter 1. It's that slow moving, and it's not. Unfortunately for me, it's not engaging enough to warrant it being that slow moving.
Sure, that makes sense.
But we do find John wakes up from this dream that he has, and he takes on the space raiders. And once again, we have a mystery character who shows up to help him. And I think this is like the second or third time that we have a character that just kind of shows up to kind of push things along a little bit, which is, I don't know whether that's a weakness or strength, because I don't know whether there's a future for those characters or if they're just thrown in out of convenience. I'm not sure.
Yeah, this guy's never been in anything before either, because I kind of looked up some stuff and I couldn't find him. I don't even know his name. Do you?
No, they don't really give him a name. And you had that guy back in the first issue that explained to John, kind of, he gave him a little hints on how to solve the puzzle of the monster that was attacking everybody, kind of thing.
Right.
And it, I don't know, it feels weak, and it doesn't help with the artwork. I think that the artist does a good job with the aliens, but boy, John's face just seems so out of whack at almost every turn. He doesn't look right. And it takes me out of the book. And I don't know. It's just not doing it for me in the first half.
I like his costume though.
Yeah. I think the costume's kind of cool looking.
And also in Thorne's defense, sorry. And this goes back to what I was talking about with Jon Stewart. I mean, maybe this is his written version of how he feels the characters should be portrayed. I mean, I'd at least like to grant the writer that much credit, because
sure,
a lot of people do that. So, if he listens or people talk to him, I mean, I hope he hears that, because I mean, if that's the case, then that's fair game. In doing so, everybody that comes along has a difference of opinion when it comes to a writer. I mean, we've seen it time and time again, and everybody has their favorites too. I mean, and everybody has the ones they don't like. I mean, and that's just the nature of the product itself. And unfortunately, these writers need to understand that with that carries a weight of, you have to handle the criticism, even from the hardcore fans that have been Green Lantern fans for decades longer than this person has ever thought about writing them.
Right. And listening to a few interviews that he's done, he didn't go to DC with the idea of saying, I want to write the Green Lantern series. He pitched a Jon Stewart miniseries.
Oh, okay.
And he had a story he wanted to tell, and they liked it. And as he was chatting them, he was kind of explaining how this might fit into the DC larger cosmic universe. And they're like, oh, we really like that, and we really like that. And then they offered him the book. So I think he's trying to tell the story he started with in some fashion, but yet still take the reins of the larger Green Lantern mythology. And DC's the one that wanted the power battery destroyed, not the writer. Another bad decision by DC, but whatever. But obviously, as a writer, you're the one that's going to have to live with the fact that you did it, because your name's on the book.
Right.
But DC's the one that did that part, and DC told him he had to use certain characters. So that part is on DC, but the rest of it's on him. There's a conversation going on a number of message boards and places on the internet about the deaths that we see here, that some of them are ones that we suspected that we've seen in previous issues. Some are ones that we've never heard of before and are being announced here for the first time. And there's actually some people trying to say, well, DC gave him a list of characters he could kill. He's never said that. And he said that he's going to clear the bench a little bit, but he kind of made it sound like it was going to be Earth Lanterns. He was going to reduce the number of Earth Lanterns a little bit. But this is almost a wholesale wiping clean of a large number of lanterns. As the end of the Jon Stewart half of this book ends up, John is on the spaceship of the Raiders, and he hears the computer going on saying RRU-92 is online, and talks about how he was dispatched to Dark Sector, and there were 1,001 bounties for the Green Lanterns, and 300 of those bounties have been collected. And when you flip to the next page or two after John kind of dispatches with the pirates, John is left alone on the ship, with RRU-92's helmet tied into the computer and a jar full of Green Lantern rings. And then there's a list of Green Lanterns whose bounties have been closed. And the presumption here is that these Green Lanterns are dead. Now, we don't know that for a fact. We know that the Raiders came here looking for John because they were looking to collect his bounty. So you've got to assume the idea is to kill them and take their ring. But they talk about a Green Lantern named Aleph Khan, we never heard of that one before. Zolol, we never heard of that one before. One called Tygraph Belgen, never heard of that Green Lantern before. Ashpak Glyph. That's a Green Lantern that appeared back in 2000. He was not used very much, but he was a regular mainstream universe member of the Green Lantern Corps. He was kind of a stony looking humanoid. But again, not a big loss because he wasn't a character who really ever got a whole lot of screen time. But then it goes to Morrow, Bounty Closed. And for those of you that remember, Morrow was a Green Lantern created by Jeff Johns and Ivan Rice back in the kind of the rising era of the Jeff Johns run. And he was basically the crypt keeper of sorts on Oa. And it was a job he volunteered to do. And he basically kind of oversaw the crypts of the dead lanterns. So he's now dead. Then it goes to Not Kaloi. Now, Not Kaloi is a fan favorite that's been around since 1961. Not Kaloi appeared initially in Green Lantern Volume 2, issue number 9, John Broome Gilkane creation. People will remember him as the Green Lantern with a fish head.
Oh, yeah.
So he's dead. Palakwa. Now, Palakwa was another Green Lantern. Didn't see a whole lot of him. He appeared kind of more in the background. He was created in 1986 by Steve Englehart. And not a whole lot about him there. He was part of a force that was sent to fight the Mad God of Sector 3600. And he supposedly, they thought he was dead, but he was shown with 5 other lanterns that were thought to have been killed by the Mad God. And he appeared during the Jeff Johns era as well. He's appeared in some of the animated stuff as background character, that kind of thing. Not a tremendous loss, but again, it's part of our history. And then Vath Sarn, which... Jeff Johns, Pete Tomasi. Vath Sarn is one half. He was Isamot Kol's partner. Yeah. And that was such a powerful story when Vath Sarn lost his legs and Isamot Kol volunteered his legs to Vath Sarn. And then Vath Sarn, coming to after having lost his legs and having them restored with space lizard legs, basically wanted them cut off because he rejected them because of the whole Rand Thanagar thing. And it's such a great story. So to see some of these names, it's rather shocking because they're dispatched off screen. You might be able to say maybe they're not dead, maybe they just got their rings, but based on how they're operating, I don't see that as being the case.
Worth noting that on the next page, Vath Sarn was how he lost his legs was when he was pushing Iolande out of the way. Was been located, apparently.
Yeah. and we saw her in the last issue.
Right.
But when we flip the page, this is how Thorne transitions from the John Stewart half of the book to the Joe Mullane, Kelly Quintella, Simon Baz part of the book. And it talks about Jinko Sin, again, a character never heard of before. Mentions Guy Gardner's missing. Aricia is confirmed dead. And I think for a lot of fans, that's the hardest one for them to swallow because she was created back in 1981 and she had a major story arc. She's been a subject of a number of story arcs in Green Lantern. She's appeared in pretty much every animated version of Green Lantern we've seen. She appeared in both the movies. She appeared on the Duck Dodgers episode. She's often used for female representation when they do Green Lantern animated stuff. So it's really kind of shocking. In fact, if you read the Earth 1 Green Lantern books, she's the leader of the Green Lantern Corps in those books.
Yeah, I don't understand that choice. It's like, I don't know. But anyway.
That was a hard one for people to see. And we kind of thought maybe that's the case. You know, we knew that the Grexians have a healing factor, but this is confirmed dead. Iolande located, again, we saw her last issue. And then Isamot Kol, who we saw also floating in space, confirmed dead. So, sad thing.
Know your core segment. Oh, speaking of which, I will go ahead and throw this out there to the listeners. I'm going to go ahead and do the Know Your Core segment moving forward. We're going to do it in honor of the fallen lanterns. Yeah. Starting with Isamot Kol.
Isamot Kol, again, another fan favorite character. Isamot Kol was in the Green Lantern movie. He's appeared in a number of different things. A real shame. And again, these are things we're seeing that these deaths occurred off the page. Even though we see their dead bodies floating, they didn't get a heroic ending that they deserved. Mentions Kyle Rayner missing, mentions Ralop Van being located, which again we saw that in the last issue when he was on the raft. It just, those 2 pages really got a lot of people upset.
Yeah, it was a tough one to swallow. And I was surprised. I mean, I don't know, as a writer, the funny thing about the Green Lantern Corps is when people come up with names for Green Lanterns, right? Take, for instance, the list of names we just read off. Now, keep in mind, some of them we've never heard of before because there's no source material for them, or they have never been introduced. So you're a writer, and you come up with a name. Tigraf Bell Jen. Yeah, we'll go ahead and name a Green Lantern that character, right? But I guess my question is, why not look back through the 3,600 other lanterns that there actually is material for and plug their name in there just so you can keep some kind of illusion of continuity within the Green Lantern universe?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of sectors that we've never seen who the Lanterns are, so to be honest, between you and me as fans and the people listening, I'd rather have had him killed a bunch of Green Lanterns I never heard of before than these guys, because some of these characters are beloved fan characters who are getting wiped off the page, and they haven't been given any page time in years and years and years and years. And they deserve it for some of the things that they've done, and they're far more interesting characters than some of the ones we're seeing starring in this book, quite frankly. And they're just kind of being wiped off for the sake of it. And, you know, people are saying, well, you know, they could be brought back, especially if John's got his guardian powers. But then isn't that really cheap? You know, that was one of the things he talked about, the writer talked about. He doesn't like deaths where people are just brought back.
Well, that's just it. Like, and that's what kind of upset me about this book. I don't like when deaths are used as plot devices. I mean, I think that's a poor way of writing. You know, especially when you want to choose characters that, I mean, I don't know. Isamot Kol, I'll use him as an example. Aritzia should be in a book anyway, or at least part of a book, and I don't understand why she's like low key enough to kill off. A character like Isamot Kol, you can use sparingly. So why go through the process of killing him off when you can just come up with some weird name, Jack Fro Poe or something like that? You know what I mean? It's like
right.
That's why I feel like the writer for this book alone, and that's why I didn't like it as much, is because I felt like it was lazy to use those as plot devices for your storyline.
Right, it's just trying to make it look like this is really serious.
Right.
That's how he's driving the point home. And, you know, it's funny, every time a book is ready to come out, he'll put out a thing on social media saying, buckle up. And I'm like, buckle up for what? We're 4 issues in and nothing really is happening other than this kind of crap. You know, we've got a very slow-moving first arc and a very slow-moving second arc in sharing a book, moving at a snail's pace that isn't terribly interesting. And quite frankly, I'd rather read a story that had Isamot Kol and Aricia and Not Kaloi and Morrow and Vath Sarn. I'd rather read a story with those guys than these guys, quite frankly.
What about Tigraf Bell Jen, man? You know that dude's got some serious Green Lantern stuff.
Whoever he is, yeah. But, you know, and it starts out, and you can see that Joe Mullane is pondered over their loss, which is funny because she's never met any of these people, so I'm not sure why she's so upset other than knowing that they're fellow Green Lanterns. But again, this story unravels very, very slowly. We see Simon Baz with his gun. and trying to rein in some of the creatures that are stored down below. And then,
see some Randians.
Yeah, we see some Randians. We see some Hawk people. I don't know. Then we see Kelly Quintella show up with a mock Green Lantern uniform. And then Joe Mullane drags her off to a briefing. And they kind of point the finger at Sinestro being a likely subject. And then Kelly Quintella goes rushing off like she's going to take on the Sinestro Corps all by herself.
Well, what did you think about this interaction between Joe Mullane and this Brainiac-looking character? I don't know who that is.
I don't remember her name either. I think she's an interesting character. They've mentioned her before. They didn't mention her name, I don't think, here in this issue, so it makes it difficult to remember. I don't know.
Worth noting though, and here's my thought. I mean, everybody's talking about how the battery blew up, the power battery blew up, right? And in this issue, he shifts that to be deconstructed.
Correct.
And on a molecular level.
They do mention the character's name, Counselor Fell.
Okay. So they talk about this quantum level of deconstruction that takes place with the power battery.
Mm-hmm.
So has it been blown up? I mean, I don't know. No, because it's been deconstructed. So that means it can be reconstructed.
Right. Basically, the counselor says, well, the macro effect mimics a conventional explosion, but in fact, the battery was disassembled on a quantum level.
Right.
And the event itself is destructive. And it's how they try to explain, and I think you and I commented on it in the first issue, when the battery went kablooey, the ring should have held the charge they had. And what this talks about is how it deconstructed, and anything that was connected to the power battery stopped working because its connection was also part of the deconstruction, and it basically tore it all apart.
Which I thought was a good explanation for it.
Yeah, I hope that was part of the original notes and it wasn't him responding to people's criticism of the first issue. But it's certainly more interesting than it blew up.
Right. Because then okay, so looking at that, how that science works, there's going to be an outcome where it's going to come back, but how it went this way is the interesting side note to it.
Right, and it also explains why does Joe Mullane's ring and why does the Gauntlet and why does Hal's ring, why do they still work? Because they're not connected. We don't know whether is Hal's ring the Robert Venditti ring where Hal built it out of pure willpower, or is this based on the Morrison run where it charged itself off the Cosmic Grail, and so it drew its power there, and that's where its connection came from. We don't know which those things are, but at least we know that kind of explains why theirs are working. We also see that the Guardians themselves are caught in this almost limbo state right now.
So and the last time we saw Hal Jordan was back in issue 1, and he was on a virtual Zoom meeting, right? I guess you could call it virtual construct meeting.
Yeah, he was listening to basically Joe Mullane's message to stay away from Oa.
So now you're at issue 4, and it's safe to say that Hal Jordan's ring is probably still working wherever he may be.
Uh-huh.
So he would have gotten. I don't understand why he wouldn't have gotten word that, like, a person like Aricia, who, mind you, Hal Jordan has not an attraction to, but an attachment to.
Mm-hmm.
Those two characters have been close throughout the book and the animated series and stuff like that. You'd think that they're. I mean, I don't know. If the writer decided not to use Hal Jordan, you're kind of catching yourself in a moment where it's like, okay, well, Hal Jordan's this prominent of a character, telling him to stay away from Oa, those don't mix, because Hal Jordan has never been known just stay away from Oa, especially with the death of some of his friends like this.
Right. Well, he doesn't know exactly what's going on, but here's the bigger quandary to me. Simon Baz knows that Hal is on Earth because he heard the announcements back in the first issue. So we've had this whole explosion and stuff. Wouldn't you think that Simon Baz would be trying to find out what happened to all of his fellow Earth Lanterns? Like, wouldn't he be trying to find out what happened to Jessica and so on? He'd be more involved in that, and knowing that Hal's on Earth.
That's a good point too. I didn't think about that.
Why wouldn't you reach out to Hal? Because you know where he is. You know where Jessica went to. You don't know whether she's still there. And we know we're going to see her in the annual coming up. You don't know about Kyle and Guy because I think they were put on the Paladin. Was it Paladin service? I can't remember exactly what it was called now. No, Outrider. They were putting out. Kyle was assigned to the Vega system. That's right. And Guy is an Outrider. So who knows where he would have been at the time. So, if I'm Simon Baz, I'd be if you're kind of the deputy to Joe Mullane, wouldn't you be saying, hey, we've got the most experienced Earth Lantern is on Earth right now. Wouldn't you want to go to Earth to find out where he is? Contact the Justice League? Something?
Yeah, but maybe we're analyzing it way too much. Or let me rephrase that. Maybe we're expecting too much in ways of rational thought when it comes to writing a character. Is that insulting to say?
No, I think this is just one of those, I didn't think about this as a writer thing. But,
that's sad.
Sure.
But then writers can't think about everything, and I understand that. But they at least should, I don't know, I think they should at least read enough source material about characters they're writing than just saying, I don't want to read any source material about characters I'm writing.
Right.
Because you still, now you might want to write them in your own way, and I understand how that works when it comes to most people who do write, but you still want to maintain some of those integral components of a character that have continued throughout whoever has written him.
Right. Well, especially when you're somebody who's gone on social media and interviews and you try to make yourself look like you're really, really smart, but you missed this. To me, it's a glaring thing. But whatever. I'm still bothered by the fact that Kelly breaks into Spanish and the ring doesn't translate. And they try to explain it here, but to me it comes off like a really lame excuse because they don't really explain it other than saying she's doing it. Well, how is she doing it? I think you're screwing up the translator. I'm sorry, but...
Well, do you think that's his way of saying maybe, go look stuff up? I knew some of it because I took a lot of Latin, and some of it I could make out. I understand, like, who's the monster, where is he or whatever. But, like, I don't know, as a writer, when you don't do a translation for readers who don't normally read Spanish, is that, like, some kind of an incentive to go look it up to see what it means?
I think it's an incentive for the editor to do their job and put an editor's box in there with the translation.
Yeah, that's fair too. Who's the editor? Who's the editor of this?
I don't know. But if you're not going to have the Power Ring do it, at least redo the benefit. That was one of the criticisms of the Morrison run, if you recall. He had some alien language in there without any translation, and I can get it because there were parts where it made it hard to read because there was no context clues, and you couldn't look it up because it was an alien language. So, but the whole idea that Kelly just runs off and goes after Sinestro, I guess as a kid, she's somebody going through trauma and whatever, but I don't know.
Well, I will say this. I don't know enough about her to judge her too harshly. So I'm going to kind of leave her. I'm going to leave her out of this, and she's not going to be subjected to my Simon Baz hatred. But let's just put it this way. When it comes to her and when I read these stories, I don't consider her. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, so, because I don't know anything about this person. First of all, the only interest I have in this is, okay, it's going to be fun to see her face to face with Sinestro. It's going to be interesting wherever that dynamic's going to take place, or what the writer decides to do with that interaction.
Right. I struggle a little bit because I think about characters like Somarley and Aricia when they were, at least when Aricia was being portrayed as a young person, that they had reverence for what they were doing. And you could kind of almost overlook the fact that they were immature. But here you've got someone who's got a gauntlet on their back that's essentially a weapon of mass destruction, who can't control her emotions and is too immature, yet the Guardians let her keep it when they could have forcefully taken it from her. It to me underscores this is exactly why letting her keep this gauntlet is a mistake.
Yeah.
But.
Well, so when it comes to Joe Moline, I will say this too. I'm going to be interested to see if her and Sinestro get some screen time more.
Oh, I'm sure they will. I'm sure that's what's coming up in the next issue.
I mean, I think a drag down fight between her and Sinestro would be a lot better than Kelly.
Sure, but quite frankly, between people who listen to it, Sinestro should have no problem mopping the floor with both of them.
Well, and that's also fair.
Right? So we'll see. But I just, this issue bothered me, not just because of the death of the Lantern, but I'm thinking about, I'm 4 issues in. If I'm paying for this book and paying $5 an issue, I'm $20 in, and I don't even have what looks like a half of a story yet.
Yeah, I mean, usually an arc consists of, 6?
Right.
And we're in 4. I mean, that means you're wrapping up your first arc in 2 more issues, which, if your lead up is 4 and you're wrapping it up in 2, it just seems kind of lopsided, right?
Right. Well, it doesn't look like it's anywhere near close to a wrap up, and I guess that's part of it. I know it's serialized fiction and stories chained together and yada, yada, yada. But again, as a consumer, I can go to the movies and get a 2-hour experience, which is more time than it would take to read these 4 issues, and get a complete experience.
Yeah.
So when I look at that, and I know serialized fiction the same way, but yeah, all that stuff. But I don't even feel like I feel like I'm still reading the first chapter of a book because nothing's really happened yet.
Yeah, you're right. And I feel the same way. I mean, the first 3 issues had me kind of excited. I was like, oh, kind of interested where this is going. This one kind of, I don't know, it left a bad taste in my mouth. It just didn't feel good after I read it. I was like, oh, that's kind of like disappointing.
Yeah, I was like, if I'd have had a paper copy of it, I think I might have torn it in half because just the deaths. You're gonna kill a lantern off, but at least respect the character enough to give them the common courtesy of letting them die with some kind of meaning, other than the battery was deconstructed and you were just an unfortunate character that I just chose out of a hat to have a victim, to make this sound like it's really a big deal because your name means something to some people.
Yeah, that's why I was kind of just questioning the motives of the writer, because it's like, what mindset are you in to just sit there and say, oh, okay, I'm going to kill off Aricia? Right. I mean, did it just come off the top of his head, or is it by design and there's something else that's going to happen later on?
I think it's by design, but nothing that's going to happen later on.
That's fair.
to be honest. But anyway, so again, I hate to be critical all the time, but I'm just not getting it in this run. It's not doing it for me. But
okay, how many rings out of 6 do you give this?
Out of 6? Well, I usually rate out of a 10 scale.
Okay, so 10 rings.
I'd probably give it a 4 or 5.
Yeah, that's about where I was kind of on that spectrum. Yeah.
I don't like Tom Rainey's artwork in the beginning of the book, and the other artwork is fine, but the opening artwork just doesn't do it for me, and the writing, the writing's not doing anything for me at all.
If there's any plus I had to find out of this, I'm starting to like Joe Moline a little bit more. I feel like that's a character that they're gonna push an agenda with.
Oh yeah.
No, obviously, and I'm not saying this obviously because of, but notably because she's female and she's African American. And
correct.
I think that comes with a purpose, and I get that, but. To me, so I read Far Sector for a little bit, and I enjoyed it. It was good. I didn't invest a lot into her. I wanted to see what Far Sector was about, so I thought the concept was cool. So when I started this, I invested a little bit more into her to see how she was going to develop. And I like where she is at. I like her as a character, and I'm kind of curious to see what they're going to do more with her. But that's one plus that comes out of this book for me, or out of the series for me anyway.
Yeah. I can think of 3,599 other Green Lanterns I'd rather read about. But
let's name them all.
Let's name them all. And we all know, the whole 5G plan. She was the plan for 5G.
Yeah.
But
I think she's still the plan. I just think the 5G part of it just it had to change.
Correct. And I not digging it. But anyway, let's you and I take a break, and we'll come back and listen to your feedback.
All right.
Prepare for a spine-tingling, nerve-shattering podcast featuring all your favorite monsters. You won't believe your ears when you listen to Monster Kid Radio. Hear your host, Derek M. Cook, and his ever-rotating stable of guests discuss your favorite classics and sometimes not-so-classic monster movies. Subscribe to Monster Kid Radio through iTunes or Stitcher, or visit monsterkidradio.net before the next weekly episode of Monster Kid Radio. Go through the archives for interviews with Sarah Karloff, Victoria Price, and Joel Hodgson. Listen to discussions about movies like Creature from the Black Lagoon, Island of Terror, and King Kong. And don't forget convention coverage from Monster Bash and the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival, Classic Monsters, Modern Talk, and the Head of Rondo Hatton, only on Monster Kid Radio.
All right, Myron. Looks like my ring is going nuts. I'm ready for some listener feedback. Ring, play the first message.
Good evening, Green Lanterns. We have several messages for you in this episode. Our first is from Kay, who has a comment about Green Lantern issue 3. Transmitting playback in 3, 2, 1.
Mind-numbingly boring. Thorne has interesting ideas, but I'm so bored reading his issues it's just meh. It's only 3 issues in and I want it to get better given it's the GLs. I always want to love anything with them in it, but it'd be dishonest to myself if I said anything other than the above.
Okay, you're talking about Green Lantern number 3, right? And so we just got done with Green Lantern number 4. And you started off by saying mind-numbingly boring. And I'll tell you what, I appreciate what you wrote, and you would have just had to send that sentence alone, and I still would have focused attention on your listener feedback. Because I think Myron and I kind of reflect a lot of that. I mean, there were some positives that are coming out of this for me personally, but that doesn't mean it impacts the whole of how I perceive the book and how it should be. So when you say mind-numbingly boring, you're entirely accurate, because I don't feel like I'm getting enough out of the Green Lantern core, the ensemble of the Green Lantern universe, like I want. Except for the small little tidbits, like I mentioned in the podcast, I'm starting to like Joe Moline a little more and stuff like that. But I mean, you're right. I mean, it's 3 issues in, now 4, and we're still mind-numbingly bored. Myron, how about you?
I think Kay summed up my thoughts exactly. I agree with Kay's point. Is I want to love anything with Green Lanterns in it, but I have to be honest.
Yeah.
It's funny because over on the CBR forums, there's a contingent of people who are very big Jon Stewart fans, and if you criticize this book, it's because you hate Jon Stewart or you're the R word, and that's like, right. No, it's just or in my case, they come at me because I'm against it because it doesn't star Hal and because I'm such a Hal hardcore fan. And it's like that's not it. We talked about it last episode. I've been through plenty of this times when Hal wasn't the lead character. That's not the point. The point is it's just not very good.
Well, and also on your point, even if that were the point that you wanted Hal, that doesn't make you it doesn't make you a bad person. I mean, that's just that's how you are. I mean, it would be the same thing as if I said, well, you said that to me. Well, who's your character you like? I mean, if that character wasn't shown focus at all, period, or taken off the table altogether, would you be okay with that? No. Right. Why is it okay for you? Well, I mean, Myron's not okay with it, and it's okay for you to have that opinion about it. As far as the R word, I mean, no, I'm not going to stand for that, because I've always said that I really don't like Jon Stewart, but I don't hate him, and I like Joe Moline. I mean, but that doesn't make me the R word. I mean, and I assume that you're talking about a racist.
Correct.
It's never the case when it comes to this at all.
No.
I mean, if anything, we're dealing with an alien race, and I like all the Green Lanterns, just because of who they are, but I don't like each individual one specifically. I just like my select few that I find the most attachment to.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Right. I think if they let Jeffrey Thorne write his miniseries that was Jon Stewart centric, that would have been fine. I just don't know as if he's equipped to write the main book, because I don't know if he's that good of a writer, to be completely honest, to be fair. I'm glad Hal's not in this book, because the writer doesn't like the character to begin with. He hates the character. I don't want to see him write something he hates. But at the same time, I don't think he's a good writer, and I don't really want him writing Hal anyway. So, whatever.
And there you go. Right.
Exactly. So, anyway, I don't want to beat a dead horse because we've talked about it enough. So go ahead, Ring, give us our next message.
The next transmission is from Stuart, and he's commenting on our last podcast. Commencing transmission in 3, 2, 1.
Last ride number 2 was pretty good. It reminded me of when DC used to make Elseworlds like JLA the Nail. I do think the GL content is good in the last ride, but I don't expect a ton of GL content because after all, this is a JL story, not GL. I am hoping this pays off. I would be disappointed that the story ends with something underwhelming. But Zdarsky has a good track record.
All right, Stuart, well, thanks for reaching out. We appreciate it. I did enjoy Last Ride as well. I mean, it reminds me of an Elseworlds, that's for sure. And I get the impression that we almost have to look at it as this is some other world in the multiverse, or the omniverse, as it were. I don't expect a lot of Green Lantern stuff either. I'm just glad to see Green Lantern at least be utilized in some way beyond being a background character. So I'm right there with you, and Zdarsky does have a good track record. I haven't read a whole lot of his stuff, but I've heard good things about his writing, and I'm enjoying the story so far. I know it's a retread of the Justice League going their separate ways and all this, that, and the other thing with the rift between Batman and Superman, but for some reason it feels different, and I lead that to in large part the quality of the writing and the character work.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm digging it, and I'll be honest with you, I like even the limited content that Green Lantern is in this. I like it better than the main book that's going on.
Very much.
So, and that's that. But you're right, Stuart. I mean, it's a good book, and I know a couple friends of mine that read Zdarsky, and they've always said great things about the writer, and so far 2 issues in, it holds true. So, right on. And we're going to get to the next one. Ring, play the next message.
The third message comes from Mason from the United Kingdom. This feedback is also about the last episode. Regional accent protocols activated. Message playback in 3, 2, 1.
Dear Myron and Phil. Greetings from the UK. I just wanted to say thank you for this podcast. I'm a fairly new fan of Green Lantern, having started reading during Grant and Liam's series. I enjoy listening to you both talking about the new stuff as well as when you revisit old content and you're not afraid to have an opinion if it's critical. Phil, I love your segment on the various Green Lanterns because I don't know much about those characters and I always learn something new. Myron, I appreciate your comments from the last episode and think you handled the subject brilliantly. I'm not liking this new book very much, and with the artist change, I'm finding it even less appealing. Either the new writer or DC seems bent on shoving these new characters in our faces and I just don't find them interesting enough, and I've dropped the book after the 3rd installment. There's so much good stuff out there that I can't justify the price tag for a book that's this boring. I think I'll start looking at back issues. Do you have a recommendation of where would be a good starting point? Cheers to you both.
All right, Mason. Well, first of all, let me say hello to you in the UK. I'm thrilled that, there's people overseas that listen to us, and Myron and I have mentioned this off mic and on mic, that it's cool that we got listeners from across the globe, especially in these trying times that we're trying to scratch and claw our way out of. I'm glad that we can offer you some entertainment. I'm glad that you're new to the Green Lantern stuff, and it's really cool that you started with the Grant and Liam series, because my friend Brian did the same thing. He's not really familiar with Green Lantern, so good place to start. Thanks for the shout out. The Know Your Core segment, it's fun. I like doing it because if the writer's not going to focus on all these characters, I think it's our service as fandom. And I think Myron will agree with this, that we should introduce listeners to these characters, because, even though we can't give them panel time, but we can at least give them a small voice out there in the void of the space, right, Myron?
Absolutely. And thank you for the kind comments about last episode and the listener feedback there. I don't want to beat a dead horse, and that's over with. So moving on with other things. I agree with you with your thoughts about the new series, as people have heard from here. I think if I were going to recommend someone a place to start, as much as I love the old Silver Age stuff, if you're really looking for the reading experience, the Johns era, you really can't go wrong. And it's hard now to fill all that in because the Pete Tomasi Green Lantern Corps run is just as important as the Jeff Johns Green Lantern book. If I could make a suggestion, and I know it's probably the more costly way of doing it, I would seek out the Jeff Johns omnibuses, because if you buy all three of the omnibuses, and I realize that's a pretty heavy entry point, but if you do, you get the entirety of that run, plus you get a lot of the Green Lantern Corps content where it crosses over. Like when you get to the Sinestro Corps War, the omnibuses actually do it in reading order, so you're getting all the chapters as they were printed back and forth with the specials integrated in. And the same when you get to Blackest Night, you get the Blackest Night issues, the Green Lantern issues, and the Green Lantern Corps issues. And so you kind of really get the whole experience, and you can read it in order, because a lot of the trade paperbacks, you'd have to figure out what reading order do I put them in? How do I put them in the order that they were printed so that I can get the most enjoyment, especially when they crossed over as much as they did. So if you can swing the omnibuses, I would start there. If not, piecemeal it and go back and look at it. I wouldn't worry so much about it when you're reading Green Lantern Rebirth about knowing the history. You could find that on Wikipedia and see what led up to that point. It deals with Hal's fall from grace to an Emerald Twilight and Kyle Rayner's rise and his selection as the Torchbearer and all that stuff. And it might be good to know that going into Rebirth, but you could read what's on Wikipedia and get the Reader's Digest version and jump right in without problem. Certainly if you were able to jump in with the Grant Morrison series and you enjoyed that, you should have no problem jumping in here. And like I said, you could piecemeal it and buy the issues individually, but that would be a rather daunting task. So I would recommend the omnibuses.
Like you said, they're hefty, and they're not cheap. I don't know what the UK rates would go. I mean, over here you're looking at probably about close to $100 a book. Yeah,
but you can, for the cost of 3 books, I think you can get some of them for like $60 to $70.
Right.
It might be worth doing it that way if you're that interested. And you could buy the first one and see if you like it. That might be the easiest way to go.
I've always wanted to get the Jeff Johns Aquaman omnibus.
Yeah, they're interesting. I mean, I haven't done a review. I was going to do a review for it, and I just haven't done it yet. I got the Brightest Day, Blackest Night big box set, and beautiful presentation. But the problem is they separated the Blackest Night book out from the Green Lantern book, from the Brightest Day book, so they're not in reading order. So you've got to literally read one issue in one book, put it down, go get another book, read the issue that goes next in that book, and go back and forth to read it in chronological order.
That's really odd how they'd set it up that way.
Yeah, I wish they'd have done it as part 1, part 2, part 3, and just put them in printed order like the omnibuses are. That certainly makes it a lot easier to read it as a reading experience. Love the packaging. Love the Book of the Black where they took all the chapters and stuck them together with the bonus content. They give you another Power Ring set. It's beautiful, but from a reading perspective, as part of the reading experience, it's not an easy way to read the books, unfortunately. Right. I'd like to recommend it more highly, to be honest, because I think it's gorgeous.
I've always liked the Peter Tomasi Lantern Decor. He did good with all the characters, if you ask me. I mean,
Peter Tomasi is really the unsung hero of the Jeff Johns era.
Yeah.
He did so many good things, and he was, let's not forget, he was an editor. He was part of the reason that Hal came back and we even got any of this stuff. He was kind of one of the chief architects of all that stuff that went on.
God, it feels like a long time ago.
It was, when you think about it, it was a long time ago. It's hard to believe. But anyway, Mason, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day, and welcome aboard. We're glad to have you. We just lost one listener, so welcome aboard. We're like I said, we're glad to have you here, and we hope you keep listening. So Power Ring, go ahead and give us the next message.
Our last message is from Colin, who is a new listener to the podcast of OA. Commencing message transmittal in 3, 2, 1.
Hey guys. I'm a new listener to the podcast and a fairly new Green Lantern fan. I just wanted to send you a short message saying that I really like that you guys try and make this podcast a show for everyone, and I feel like it's one of the most welcoming communities out there in the land of comic book discussion on the internet. Discovering your podcast has given me a new favorite show to listen to, and has deepened my love for the Green Lantern Corps.
All right, Colin. Well, I appreciate the message, and again, welcome to the show. We're glad that you are enjoying it so far, and I appreciate your comments about the community we have here. If you're on Facebook, seek out the Blog of OA Facebook group. We've got over 2,400 people that share similar likes and dislikes and so on. And there's always a lot of interesting conversation. And there's a Green Lantern book club. Love to see you be a part of that as well. There's a lot of neat stuff. So I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to send us the message and let us know that you're out there listening, because it does help us. It helps energize us to know that we're contributing positively to somebody's fan experience.
And for clarification, the Facebook group is 2,400 members of the Green Lantern Corps.
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, man, it's really cool that he's nice enough to write in and send a kind message like that, and Myron's always strived to make sure that his baby, this is his brainchild, has always adhered to, listener friendly. And, in the background, I'm a cursor, and unfortunately, if I was let loose on this podcast, there'd be bleeps all over it. So we'd probably be like 2 hour long. But but I like the fact that that's what Myron wants to do, and I know I listen to a lot of other podcasts, and people really, really talk harshly, I guess you can say, or speak harshly about things, or are really, really too judgmental about this, and really, really too critical about that. And while it's okay to be critical, I think there's a line that needs to be drawn. So much because there's still a human element behind it. You don't need to demean somebody just because you don't like something. But I've always liked the fact that Myron wanted to make sure that his audience was comfortable enough to listen to it no matter what age you fall into. Because there's going to be a point at some time when Clark might go back and listen to some of this stuff and listen to his dad, if he ends up liking comic books, who knows. But I appreciate it, Colin. And I know that for a fact that this means a lot to Myron that you wrote that.
Absolutely. Welcome to the Corps, dude.
Exactly.
All right, my friend, we're going to have the Power Ring tell these good folks how they can be a part of the show and leave us some feedback, and then we'll be back.
All right.
You can become a part of the show by leaving a message up to 1 minute long on our voicemail line. Call us at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can also email us at podcast@blogofoa.com. We'd love to hear from you.
This is Giancarlo Volpe, producer of Green Lantern, the animated series, and you're listening to the podcast of OA.
All right, Phil, that wraps up episode number 196, my friend. So we should be back, maybe in a week or so, and we'll talk about Justice League Last Ride number 3. That should be out. So I'm excited to talk about that and see what goes on.
Yeah, it's cool. I'm liking that. I'm looking forward to reading it when it comes out. It's like my stuff has been diminished so much with like my pull list every week, and like comic book day on Wednesday it isn't the same for me anymore. Because I don't have a lot of pulls. A lot of my characters are gone or not written. But that's one of them I look forward to at least. At least I know I can count on to know I'm going to get something out of it. Green Lantern second to that. But that's slowly diminishing, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm not buying a whole lot myself right now. I think the only DC superhero book I'm buying is Last Ride. And I'm reading the new Conjuring miniseries. I'm reading that. And what's the other one? James Tynion has got another horror book out, and I've got the first 2 issues in my pull box. I haven't picked them up yet. Gosh, I don't remember what the name of the book is. Do you?
Oh, I just started it. That's the Nice House on the Lake.
That's the one. Yeah. How is that?
Yeah, it's good. Well, I just started it, so I'm only a couple pages in. I was actually reading it before. Well, I was late getting on the podcast because me and my wife were having a really, really good discussion. I was like, well, I got to go do my podcast, so let's shelve it until later. And then, but I was reading it before that, and it's pretty good. It pulled me in the first 2 pages, and I was like, okay, this could be good.
Oh, yeah. Now I'm excited to read it. I'm buying those 2 books, and then, like I said, the Last Ride book, and then the only other book I'm buying is Geiger.
Yeah, so I tried Geiger. It didn't grab me.
No.
I've been doing I do a lot of the indie stuff. I mean, there's this one book, Captain Harlock, that I'm into. It's kind of cool. The Jupiter's Legacy Requiem. Berserker's cool. The Keanu Reeves book. I like that. That's been going pretty strong every issue. But all the indie stuff, I did come across this one called The Department of Truth, Volume 1. I'm going to try that out and see what that's like. It looked kind of interesting. That's written by Tinian too.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
And he's a good writer. I liked him. I liked a lot of his stuff. So.
Great.
A lot out there.
All right, my friends. We will be back in a week or two, and we'll be talking about, like I said, Justice League Last Ride number 2. Till next time, treat each other well, keep that power ring charged, and make every day your brightest day. The Podcast of OA is the official podcast of the blog of OA and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can send your emails to podcast@blogofoa.com. You can also find the Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA on Twitter and Facebook. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.